Chapter 1. I walked into Malachi's shop on a Monday, though I didn't ruin my own life until 2 days later. I was the first shifter the magician's assistant had ever seen, but she didn't recognize me as one right away. I was in my human form, and to a mortal with untrained eyes, my wolf identity wasn't easily discernible. I probably looked like an ordinary man in my late 20s, though I'd been told I wasn't easy to overlook. Pent-up strength and well-built muscles tend to draw attention, the kind most women's eyes would linger on. But it wasn't my body that caught her attention. It was my eyes, dark and troubled. She stared at me like she was trying to figure me out. Maybe she liked men brooding and mysterious. She couldn't have been more than 19, still young enough not to know what she liked or didn't. She watched me pace the street a couple of times before I made my way inside, moving with a purpose I didn't bother to hide. I'd come here for one reason, and I wasn't about to waste time pretending otherwise. The moment I walked in, I could feel her eyes on me. But I didn't care. My gaze swept the room, searching for him. "I'm here to see the magician," I said, my tone commanding. "I'd like to make a wish." Her response was immediate and sharp. "No." She returned a book to a shelf with deliberate detachment, though I could tell she didn't really know where it belonged. I arched an eyebrow, watching her carefully. "Aren't you going to go get him?" I asked, crossing my arms. "No thanks," she replied casually. "I choose life." When my expression hardened into a displeased scowl, she added quickly, "He's off today." Over. I clenched my jaw, debating whether or not to force my way past her to get what I wanted. But in the end, I exhaled a long breath and nodded. "When should I come back?" I asked. She muttered something under her breath, something I wasn't meant to hear, but finally replied, "Come back tomorrow." I turned and left, her quiet hostility fading into the background. I didn't have time to care about her suspicions. I wasn't here for her. Chapter 2. I didn't return to the shop the next day. Not because I didn't want to, but because I needed time to think. Malachi's offer wasn't one I could take lightly. Breaking a mating bond wasn't just meddling with magic. It was interfering with nature itself. But on the day after, I went back. The assistant from before frowned when she saw me again, her suspicion obvious as I walked into the shop. I could tell she hadn't expected me to return, or maybe she'd hoped I wouldn't. Either way, I wasn't about to let her judgment stop me. She led me silently to the back room, where Malachi was busy building a house of cards. I stood in the doorway for a moment, taking in the sight. It was ridiculous. This man, this supposed magician with the power to grant any wish, looked more like a bored recluse trying to pass the time than someone capable of wielding such incredible magic. "Client," the assistant announced as she ushered me into the room. Malachi didn't even glance up. He added an ace of hearts to his precarious construction, ignoring both of us completely. "He was already here 2 days ago," the assistant added, her tone critical. She looked at him like she was questioning her entire existence, like she was wondering, once again, why her father had left her in Malachi's care. I didn't know the details, but I could see her frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I'll be with you in a second," Malachi said, his focus still on the cards. He was an odd character, to say the least, disheveled and unbothered, with an air of detachment that suggested he didn't care what anyone thought of him. And yet, there was something about him, something unsettling that hinted at the depths of his power. I cleared my throat, trying to shake off the unease that always crept in when I was near him. "What is it you desire?" Malachi finally asked, flicking a finger at his creation. The whole thing toppled to the ground, the cards scattering across the table. "To become alpha of your pack," he added, smirking as if he already knew the answer. I blinked at him, caught off guard. "No," I said quickly. "Don't act so surprised," he replied, leaning back in his chair. "Becoming the alpha is usually what any shifter wants. Sounds like a hassle to me. But what do I know? It's not what I want," I repeated, my voice firm. Malachi raised an eyebrow. "Oh," he asked, his tone laced with curiosity. "Then what would you like me to do for you?" I hesitated for a moment, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. But then I straightened, my resolve hardening. "My brother just took a mate," I began, my voice tinged with bitterness. "I would like you to break the bond." Chapter 4. "So, you want me to break your brother's bond to his mate?" Malachi said, breaking the silence after I finished explaining my story. By that point, his assistant, whose judgmental eyes hadn't left me since I started talking, looked much less sympathetic. I could feel her disapproval in the room, like a heavy fog. It didn't matter. None of this was her business, and honestly, it wasn't Malachi's either. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I want him to forget about Lila, and find someone better suited for the job." Malachi raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Can you make that happen?" I asked. "Of course," he replied, his tone casual, but his eyes sharp. "But it will cost you." I straightened in my chair. "How much?" "It's not money I want," Malachi said, leaning forward slightly. "I'll grant your wish, and in exchange, I'll take what matters most to you." The room felt colder after he said it, as though the weight of his words had physically shifted the air. "What matters most to me?" I repeated, frowning. It seemed like a vague, almost rhetorical question, but I had a clear answer in my head. "I guess that would be my Lamborghini," I said, not entirely pleased with the idea. Malachi's assistant rolled her eyes dramatically, but I ignored her. "It's a car," I added, shrugging. "It's vintage, but I'm happy to give it up for Ethan's sake." Malachi leaned back in his chair, looking thoroughly unimpressed. "I guess I could use a new car," he said with a half-hearted shrug. "Though keep in mind, what matters most to people is rarely what they expect. I can't guarantee I'll be taking your car for payment. I'll be taking what matters most to you." "It's definitely the car," I insisted with a small smirk. "I don't have much else that matters as much." "If you say so," Malachi replied, his tone dismissive. He gestured toward his assistant. "I'll let you think about it for a minute." I think my assistant has something to say. She didn't waste a second, ushering me into the adjacent room. "Don't do it," she said as soon as the door shut behind us. Her tone was sharp, her eyes full of frustration. I crossed my arms. "Why not?" "It's a selfish wish," she snapped. "You're going to ruin this couple's chance at happiness." "I don't make the rules," Malachi said calmly from the other room, clearly hearing our conversation. "But you could discourage him," she argued, ignoring him. "Make him understand what he's asking for is wrong." "How would you know it's wrong?" I countered, annoyed by her interference. "You've known me for all of 10 minutes, and you don't know my brother or Lila. For all you know, she could be manipulative or weak, and Ethan might be better off without her." Her face twisted in frustration, and she let out a small, exasperated sigh. "Do what you want then," she muttered, turning to leave. "You always do." She didn't look back, and I didn't stop her. Minutes later, Malachi granted my wish. And somewhere not too far from here, a bond was broken. Chapter 5. A month later, I returned to the den to find Lila sitting by herself on the porch, cradling one of those herbal teas she seemed to love. "It doesn't even smell good," I said, eyeing the cup in her hands. "Seriously, why do you drink that stuff?" She looked up, her face lighting up as though she'd only just realized I was there. "Damon," she greeted warmly, her voice soft and welcoming. Some wolf she was. Most of the pack would have heard me coming from miles away, but Lila was always lost in her own thoughts, daydreaming as if she didn't have a care in the world. I didn't regret breaking the bond she had with Ethan, not for a second. Neither of them remembered it. They didn't even seem to feel the void where it had been. Their lives adjusted to a reality where they'd never been bonded in the first place. I'd made sure of that when I made my wish. I couldn't risk Ethan renewing the bond down the line or being tempted to court her again. But I hadn't wanted Lila to suffer, either. She might have been weak, but I wasn't cruel. Breaking her heart would have served no purpose. She was kind, gentle, and undeserving of any malice. "Would you like me to make you one?" she asked, gesturing to her drink with a small smile. "It's an acquired taste, but it's good for the body." The last thing I wanted was to drink her strange tea, but there was something about the way she looked at me, so hopeful and eager to please, that made me say, "I guess. If you add whiskey to it." "I can do that," she replied brightly, her face lighting up with a rare spark of enthusiasm. "Wait here." When she returned, we sat together in silence, sipping our mismatched drinks. The tea was as unappealing as I'd imagined, but I found myself strangely at ease. Lila wasn't much of a conversationalist. Unlike the other women in the pack, who always had something to say, whether it was a pressing issue or an attempt to flirt, Lila said little. She just sat there, radiating a quiet calm that I hadn't appreciated before. It was unsettling at first, but now, I had to admit, it wasn't entirely unpleasant. "You know, Damon," she said softly as I got up to leave, "I've always wanted to thank you." "Thank me?" I asked, genuinely caught off guard. "Yes," she said, her voice earnest. "I'm very grateful your family agreed to take me in." "That wasn't my decision," I replied, feeling a pang of discomfort. "Maybe not," she said, turning her eyes down to her drink. "But I know your brother and father. They'd never have agreed to let me stay if you'd argued against it. And for that, I thank you." Her words hit me harder than they should have. Sure, I hadn't argued against her staying, but I hadn't encouraged it either. I'd made no effort to help her settle in, no attempt to train her or integrate her into the pack. I'd dismissed her as a lost cause and ignored her existence more often than not. And yet, here she was, thanking me as though I'd done her some great kindness. "I know I'm not very strong," Lila continued, smiling sadly. "So I'm grateful you've given me a chance, Damon." "Thank you. Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my curiosity getting the better of me. She looked away, her voice bright, but her expression heavy. "Because your brother has arranged for me to be mated," she said. "He's from another pack, so I'll be leaving soon." Her words lingered in the air long after she'd spoken them, filling me with an unease I couldn't shake. Chapter 7. "To be honest," Gareth said as Lila left us alone to discuss pack politics, "I'm not very difficult. I just want a nice mate who can cook and bear my children. I don't care that she's not very strong, and your brother promised me a nice dowry for her. He said it like it was meant to reassure me, as though I should be pleased. Maybe a month ago, I would have been, but now? Ever since I made that wish, ever since I tore Lila and Ethan apart, I haven't felt like myself. It's just the guilt," I told myself, trying to push back the grimace his words triggered. "Except Lila isn't some piece of stock to be bartered or exchanged for pragmatic reasons. She's a person with thoughts and feelings. Not that anyone seemed to remember that. Even Lila didn't seem to mind her reservations, as though her hopes and dreams didn't matter." "But what did you think of him?" I asked her later, on the drive back home. "He's a strong wolf," she replied, polite as ever. "We've established that, Lila," I said, the edge in my voice surprising even me. "But did you like him?" "What's not to like?" she said, as if reciting a script. "I'm very lucky to have found a match, Damon. I know that." I ground my teeth, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "It's not just about finding a random match," I said. "It's about finding love, happiness." The words sounded foolish as soon as they left my mouth. I looked over to see her staring at me like I'd grown a second head. She studied me, her expression hesitant, as if trying to figure out what I wanted her to say. And that's when it hit me. She'd always done this. Always tried to guess what I wanted to hear, what I needed from her. "I don't know what you want me to say," she admitted, her voice small and fragile. "Do you think you could grow to love him?" I asked. She hesitated, her gaze falling to her lap. When she spoke, her voice was firmer than I'd ever heard it. "My heart has always belonged to another," she said quietly. "And it always will." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. All these feelings swirling inside me. They were new, unfamiliar, and I didn't know what to do with them. "But don't worry," Lila said, placing her small hand on my arm. Her kindness only made the ache worse. "He's not someone I stand a chance with. I'll mate with Gareth. I promise. I would never let you down, Damon." Her words lingered in the air, leaving me with nothing but the weight of my own choices. Chapter 8. The date for Lila and Gareth's mating ceremony had been set, and it should have been everything I hoped for. It should have been the final step in ensuring her future, the last piece of the puzzle that allowed her to move on, and allowed me to move on too. But it wasn't. The closer the day came, the more restless I became. It started small, missing a few hours of sleep here and there, skipping meals. But soon, I couldn't focus on anything. My appetite was gone, and every waking moment was consumed by the thought of her leaving with a wolf she didn't truly want. She believed she couldn't do better. Because I made sure she couldn't do better, I ruined her happiness. Lila says she loves someone who would never have her. But I know that isn't true. Ethan would have had her, had already taken her as his mate. She was happy with him, and I destroyed that. How about I train Lila personally? I suggested to Ethan one evening. If she became stronger, we could find her a better match. Ethan didn't object. He still cared for her, still wanted her to be happy. So I started spending more time with her, hunting in our wolf forms, practicing her fighting skills, helping her attune her senses and control her abilities. And I could see it, how hard she tried, how much effort she put into improving. She wanted to be stronger. But it wasn't for herself. It wasn't for a better mate. It was for me. "Maybe that's your problem," I snapped at her during one of our training sessions. "You're always thinking about other people and what they want. What do you want, Lila? Do you even want to be stronger?" Her kind smile faltered, and I felt like I'd just struck her. Tears welled in her eyes, and I hated myself for putting them there. "It doesn't matter what I want," she said quietly, her voice trembling but resolute. "Because I'll never have it. I know that, and I've made peace with it. But if I can bring a smile to someone else's face, then at least it won't have been a waste." "You're not a waste," I protested, the words spilling out of me. And I meant it. It wasn't because she couldn't fight or defend herself that she lacked value. Lila had something more, something I hadn't appreciated before. She was calm and understanding, someone who could read people easily and find a way to help them, even at her own expense. That wasn't nothing. I couldn't believe I'd ever thought it was. "Please don't be angry with me, Damon," she said softly, taking my hand in hers. "I just want you to be happy. I always have." Chapter 9. I didn't expect to see Gareth again. Not at Malachi's shop. I was upstairs making dinner when I heard the shouting, his voice echoing through the walls, full of rage and desperation. Curiosity got the better of me, and I hurried downstairs. What I saw made me freeze in place. Gareth was terrifying. He wasn't human. I knew that the first time I saw him, but now it was unmistakable. His energy filled the room, primal and wild, like a predator about to pounce. He had Malachi cornered, yelling with a force that made me flinch. "I'll pay whatever you want or do whatever you want," Gareth growled, his voice low and guttural. "I don't care, but you have to cancel my wish." Malachi didn't even flinch. "I couldn't cancel your wish even if I wanted to," he replied, his tone infuriatingly casual. "Once it's done, it cannot be undone. Until the day I die." Chapter 10. For a moment, Gareth looked like he was considering making that happen. I stepped forward before I could stop myself, my heart racing. What if he makes a second wish? I asked quickly, the words tumbling out of my mouth. Would that work? Malachi's eyes snapped to me, his expression darkening. "Go back upstairs, Iris," he said sharply. But I wasn't about to let it go. What if? One wish per person, Malachi interrupted coldly. No refunds. I watched as Gareth's anger deflated. His shoulders sagged, and the fire in his eyes was replaced with something worse. Sadness. Please, he said, his voice broken. If not for me, then for her. Lila's a good person, the best. And she's about to mate with someone who doesn't even see that. Who doesn't even see the beautiful soul she has. But Ethan did. He would have made her happy. What I did to her was unfair. Malachi sighed, looking bored. Life is unfair, he said. Now leave us, Shifter. You're scaring my assistant, and she doesn't scare easily. I won't have it. Gareth didn't argue. He just left, his steps heavy, like the weight of the world was crushing him. We never saw him again. Chapter 11. A week after Gareth's departure, another shifter walked into Malachi's shop. She was small and unassuming, her pale blonde curls framing a freckled face with earnest brown eyes. She didn't look powerful or impressive. She wouldn't have even if she tried. But she didn't try. Instead, she greeted us with a warm, hopeful smile that instantly softened the air around her. It's Lila, I realized, startled to see her. I heard that you grant wishes, she said to Malachi, her voice steady and calm, like she wasn't about to gamble with the unknown. So I've come to make one. I felt a sinking sensation in my chest. Had Gareth told her what he'd done? It must be why she was here. He couldn't make a second wish, but Lila could. She could undo what he'd done. Break his wish and reunite herself with Ethan, her rightful mate. All right, Malachi said, his tone neutral as he studied her. What is it you desire? Lila's expression shifted, becoming resolute. There's someone in our pack, she began, her voice soft but filled with conviction, who's so worried about us being vulnerable that he focuses his entire life on making sure we're safe. He doesn't think about his own happiness. I don't think he even knows how to be happy. You understand? She paused, her face clouded with a deep sadness. It's because when he was little, his mother died protecting him. He feels guilty, and he's afraid that if he starts thinking with his heart rather than his head, he'll lose everything again. But he deserves better than that. He's a good man, and he deserves to be happy. I just want him to be happy. Malachi tilted his head, his gaze softening just slightly. Is that your wish? Yes, sir, she said, her voice steady with determination. I wish for the man I love to be happy. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I glanced at Malachi, nervous. He hadn't even told her about the consequences of making a wish. She'd already suffered enough because of his magic, and now she was willing to risk everything again, just to see someone else happy. I opened my mouth to speak, to warn her, but Malachi shot me a sharp look. Very well, he said, his tone calm but firm. Tonight, the man you love will ask something of you. Agree to it, and you'll ensure his happiness forever. Relief lit up Lila's face, and for a moment, she looked like she might burst into tears. I will, she said without hesitation, her enthusiasm radiating warmth. It really will make him happy. I guarantee it, Malachi replied with a small, knowing smile. Oh, thank you, she exclaimed, jumping to her feet. Thank you, sir. Really? She turned to leave, but then hesitated, spinning back around as if something had just occurred to her. What do I owe you for the wish? She asked, her voice timid. Malachi shrugged, the faintest flicker of amusement crossing his face. That one's free of charge, he said. Chapter 12. Lila's mating ceremony with Gareth was set for tomorrow, and I'd finally decided it was unacceptable. She had made it painfully clear that she was only agreeing to this union to please the pack, but Lila needed to understand something. We needed her here. I needed her here. I didn't want her to leave, especially not if it meant condemning her to unhappiness. But I also knew that Lila needed a mate. So, really, there was only one thing left for me to do. I knocked on her bedroom door, feeling more nervous than I'd thought possible. I had barely tapped once when the door opened, and there she stood, looking hopeful and expectant. "Damon," she exclaimed, sounding confusingly relieved. "I was worried you weren't going to show, but you're here." Before I could respond, she pulled me into the room and gestured for me to sit on a chair. I obeyed, feeling uncharacteristically dumbfounded. "Go ahead," Lila said, her hands wrapping around mine, her gentle smile urging me forward. "Tell me, what can I do for you?" I frowned. "How do you know I have something to ask you?" "A hunch," she replied, her smile unwavering. She looked so eager to please, and it twisted something inside me. Well, I hesitated, my heart sinking. It had seemed like a good idea when I'd first thought of it. But now, as I sat in front of her, her trusting eyes fixed on mine, I realized how selfish I'd been. My plan was to ask her to mate with me instead of Gareth. If she became my mate, she wouldn't have to leave the pack. She could stay here, stay with the family and the people she knew. She'd be safe, protected, and loved. And I'd be a good mate to her. I'd do everything in my power to make her happy. I wasn't Ethan, but maybe I could be the next best thing. I was almost certain she liked me better than Gareth. But sitting there, looking into her eyes, I saw her warmth, her kindness, and the trust she placed in me. That's when it hit me. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for me. I wanted her for myself. I'd fallen in love with her. And instead of trying to fix the mess I'd made, instead of reuniting her with the mate she deserved, I'd come here to claim her for my own. The realization made me sick, but it also gave me resolve. If I loved her, truly loved her, then I'd do the right thing. I'd make her happy, even if it meant giving her up. "Lila," I began, my voice low as I brought her hand to my lips. "You once told me there was someone you'd always love. Someone you'd prefer to be mated with." Her brow furrowed slightly. "Yes, but, well, I came here tonight to tell you that this person does, in fact, love you," I said, swallowing hard. "And he would love nothing more than to have you for his mate. And if you let me, I promise you, Lila, I'll make sure." Before I could finish, she threw her arms around me, burying her face in my neck. "You love me," she whispered, her voice trembling with hope and tears. "You really love me, Damon?" The words caught in my throat, and for a moment, I was utterly confused. "What?" I asked, unable to comprehend what was happening. She pulled back sharply, her face falling into terror. "I thought you just said the person I love felt the same," she said, her voice shaking. "But I misunderstood, didn't I?" Her gaze dropped, and she twisted her hands nervously. "Of course, you don't feel this way about me," she murmured, her voice cracking. She looked like she was about to leave, to pull away from me entirely. I didn't think I'd survive it. Before I could stop myself, I grabbed her arms and pulled her onto my lap, my heart pounding in my chest. "Of course I love you, Lila," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, pure joy flooded her expression. "But you said there's someone you've loved forever," I continued, still struggling to make sense of it all. "And that you'd always love, so I thought, I'd assumed she meant Ethan." "It's you," she said simply, her small hand resting on mine. "It's always been you." Forgetting the customs, forgetting Gareth, forgetting everything, I took her face in my hands and kissed her. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Happiness. When I pulled away, I rested my forehead against hers and whispered, "Break your engagement, Lila. Be my mate instead." "Yours?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "Really?" "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "Please, will you accept me as your mate and make me the happiest man in our entire pack?" Her eyes widened in surprise, but then a slow, radiant smile spread across her face. "Yes," she said softly. "Yes, of course I will." Chapter 13. At the end of it all, did destiny take its course? Malachi, and his assistant sat in the shop talking. Malachi poked at the food on his plate, lifting his fork cautiously to his nose. "I think it's burnt," he said flatly, with that same infuriating indifference he always carried. I ignored him, my thoughts elsewhere. "Poor Lila," I muttered mostly to myself. "I don't think I'm going to get any sleep tonight." Malachi's only response was a half-hearted hum as he turned back to the stove. Frustration bubbled over. Why did my father leave me with someone who ruins people's lives? I snapped. "It makes no sense." He didn't even flinch, just stirred whatever concoction he was working on like I wasn't even in the room. "And your rules don't make sense either," I added, my voice rising. "Is anything you've ever told me about your job even true? You're always saying you can't grant wishes for free." But I trailed off, narrowing my eyes at his back. "How come you agreed to grant her wish for nothing in return? I thought you said that wasn't possible." He finally turned slightly, enough to shrug over his shoulder. "I didn't grant her anything," he said nonchalantly, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "What?" I frowned, trying to piece together what he meant. "She got what she wanted. Magic-free," Malachi added with a casual wave of his hand, like that explained everything. I folded my arms, staring at him as if he'd grown another head. "That doesn't make any sense," I said, the confusion clear in my voice. But he didn't answer, turning back to his sauce. "Well, Gareth will be relieved to see things end well for her, I guess," I said finally, trying to process it all. "At least no one's life got ruined today." "Good for you." Malachi chuckled softly, the sound low and almost smug. "I guess not," he replied. He started sprinkling spices into his pan, clearly more interested in his meal than the conversation. "But," I pressed, my voice sharper now, "you still took the thing he loved most, didn't you? Don't you think he'll miss it?" Malachi paused, turning his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "Not really," he said after a moment. "If anything, it was holding him back." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, stepping closer to him. Malachi sighed, setting his spoon down with deliberate care. "It was his fear," he said quietly, his tone serious now. "His fear of losing the people he loved. He held on to it like it was his most precious possession. So, that's what I took from him. That was the price of his wish." I stared at him, my mouth slightly open as I tried to process what he'd just said. "His fear," I repeated, disbelief coloring every word. "That's awful. How does that even benefit you? If anything, you helped him on top of granting his wish." Malachi didn't respond right away. He poured another handful of pasta into the pot, the steam rising up to obscure his face. For a moment, I thought he wasn't going to answer at all. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter than usual. "I guess we'll find out." And just like that, he went back to cooking, leaving me standing there, more confused than ever. The room felt heavy with unanswered questions, but I knew better than to press him further. Malachi had his own way of doing things, and trying to understand it was like trying to catch smoke with bare hands. Did destiny take its course? Malachi and his assistant sat in the shop, the flickering light of the old chandelier casting shifting shadows across their faces as they talked, the question hanging unspoken between them. Maybe if fate was cruel, in another world, maybe it didn't go as well for Damon. Maybe if fate had twisted itself cruelly, the stars wouldn't have aligned, and the love he so desperately clung to would have unraveled before his eyes. He imagined it clearly, vividly, as though he could reach out and touch the jagged edges of the alternate path. In that world, when Damon confessed to Lila, it wasn't with trembling hope, but with the sinking weight of inevitability. He would have stood there, his voice steady but hollow, and laid bare the truth that had festered within him. "I broke your bond with Gareth," he would have said. No embellishment, no attempt to soften the blow, just the stark, ugly truth. Lila would have stared at him, her features slowly shifting from confusion to disbelief, and then to a fury so intense it would have been like staring into the heart of a storm. "You did what?" she might have whispered, her voice trembling, not from fear, but from a deep, searing anger. "I thought I was doing what was best," he would have explained, though even in that moment, he would have known how feeble it sounded. "For the pack. For Gareth. For you. For me," she might have laughed, the sound sharp and bitter, like shattered glass. "You didn't do this for me, Damon. You did it for yourself. You decided I wasn't good enough. You thought you knew better than me, better than Gareth. How dare you?" And in that world, she wouldn't have forgiven him. She would have turned her back on him, her voice trembling with the force of her rejection. "You're selfish, Damon," she would have said, her words striking like a whip. "You didn't just ruin what I had with Gareth. You ruined us. You ruined everything." In that other world, Lila wouldn't have been swayed by his pleas or his remorse. She wouldn't have reached for him in forgiveness or allowed herself to be swept up in the tidal wave of his love. Instead, she would have walked away, leaving him standing alone with the weight of his actions. And maybe in that world, she wouldn't have returned to Gareth either. Maybe she would have looked at Gareth and seen not the love they once shared, but the cracks Damon had forced into their bond. She might have realized she couldn't go back, not after what had been taken from her. In that world, Lila would have chosen herself. She would have refused to be a pawn in Damon's guilt or Gareth's expectations. She would have left them both behind, carving out her own path away from the shadows of their mistakes. And Damon? In that world, he would have stood on the sidelines, watching her leave. He would have seen her rise, stronger and more resolute than ever, and known that he was the one who had driven her away. In that world, he wouldn't have the warmth of her forgiveness or the comfort of her love. All he'd have was the knowledge that he had been the architect of his own loneliness. And as Damon thought about this other world, this cruel, alternate fate, he wondered if he deserved it. If perhaps, in some way, he should have lived that version of events. Because maybe, just maybe, it was too much to ask for a happy ending when the story he'd written was built on betrayal. All is well that ends well, Damon thought, pulling Lila close as they watched the sunset together, knowing that this world, their world, was exactly where they were meant to be. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. We have so much more to share with you.